is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we are here with Dwid of the Almighty Integrity. Thanks for being here, man. It is great to have you here.
Hey, thank you, Alex. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to be able to talk with you today. Your latest album, Howling for the Nightmare Shall Consume. I still listen to it like it came out in 2017, like it's still awesome. But now that this record is, aged quite a bit, is there a chance we could be expecting some new Integrity soon, if you're allowed to say, of course?
Yeah, I'm working on some new songs. Recently, Relapse has taken over our old catalog, and so I spiced up some of the old master reels with Arthur Risk, who's my producer, and we went through all the old albums and found lost solos or solos that we just muted and didn't use on the original records, and other different little tricks and details and things we thought would make it more interesting. So we started to unearth all of these old albums, and I thought it would go really fast, but it's gone really slow. Not because of anybody's fault. It's just I didn't expect it to be as much work as it was, and so therefore that's what's holding me back on the new album, because I'm trying to get all these reissues out first so that they're out of the way, and then I can focus on the new album. I think it was Monday or Tuesday, Relapse released "Humanity's the Devil" on which is the third album from Integrity.
Yeah.
So there's a couple more in the queue. I'm almost there though. I'm working on it, and then we'll have a new album out after all those.
Well, there's a lot to celebrate in the Integrity world for 2023 because it marks 10 years of Suicide Black Snake. It marks 20 years of To Die For. So is that kind of like tied into the reissue? Are we getting some of those reissues to celebrate that anniversary?
Not those albums, but the next one up in the queue is Seasons in the Size of Days, which came out in 97 or 98. 98, I think. So that's the next one, and I don't know exactly when that's coming out. There's some scheduling things that go on with pressing records right now that are out of the control of the artists and the record companies. Just with the pressing plants, there's some kind of delays and dilemmas. And so having a release date is up in the air usually for these things.
It's always worth the wait. But with the sound of Integrity, because in the end it's brutal hardcore, but I've always noticed that there's some tricks and twists in it. There's always an evolution. I mean, when you go all the way back to Those Who Fear Tomorrow and you look at now, was there always like a preconceived vision of how you wanted Integrity to evolve in its sound? Or was your songwriting process always sort of like a organic, experimental, and rather improvisational process?
A little bit of all of that, I suppose. I didn't really think about evolution or that there was a possibility of evolution. But I guess I had hoped that there could be. And technology's offered a lot of advances with that as well. As far as like the sound or the mood of Integrity, that's always been kind of consistent throughout all the albums, even though the albums can vary in style and in structure and lineup. But ultimately, it's something about something surrounding my curiosity for religion and for philosophy, why we're here, my upbringing within a very strict religious community, and how I rebelled against that, and also in an inverted way embraced it and added all of that to the mix, and then all the music that I like, which is a very wide array of different kinds of music. And I just take the things that I like, and then I think, well, I would love to hear a song that would be kind of like this, but add this other element and maybe go further over here with that aspect or component. And that's oftentimes where I come up with when I'm making a new song. Mm-hmm. Just basically something that I wanted to hear that I haven't been able to hear from someone else. And so therefore I make it. I mean, that was pretty much the impetus of the band anyways, was to make a band that I wanted to listen to.
Absolutely. And I think in the end, like, it has a hardcore aspect, it has a metal aspect, and I think it resonates with a lot of people because of the rebellious nature in it, which is what I think resonated with so many people in hardcore to begin with. Like when I listen to a track such as Hatred of the World, for example, like that really has a sort of like with the melodic intro into it and the way that it kicks into it, I think musically and lyrically it has the ability to resonate with people. And with your lyricism, did you always prefer to have music before you could put pen to paper on lyrics, or did your lyrical ideas, whether it would be religion or the occult or any of your ideas, did that influence the music that we hear in Integrity?
It could be both. This is the 35th year of Integrity, so the approaches have changed off and on, and also have been mixed up and different throughout. I mean, there's so many different songs that have taken different directions as well. But I think I like the best way to go is to write a story about what the song should be about, and then have the music and the lyrics reflect what the story is about, and then not tell the people listening to the song what the story is.
Mm-hmm.
So that way there's an extra level of depth to it that isn't necessarily revealed, but maybe can be sensed. And the reference points in the music and in the lyrics can, I think, be a little more satisfying for people, or at least for me. So that's kind of something that I like to do. But I don't always think, or I rarely think about, will this please people? Because I don't think that that's an approach that should be ever taken by anybody, because you're always going to let yourself down, because it's never going to be what you thought. And if you're trying to second guess what people are going to want, you're going to always disappoint yourself and disappoint your audience as well. So I think that the most important thing is to make songs that you love, that you want to hear, with parts of music that you've always thought, hey, that would be great to listen to if somebody was to make that.
Mm-hmm. Well, with the lyrics that you incorporated, because you have so many different elements from the personal to the external, there seems like you're looking both inward and outward for your lyrics.
Yeah.
So depending on the subject matter of a song, does it resonate with you or hit you differently depending on what it's about, or regardless of that, it's always sort of inducing the same emotion regardless of what it's about?
Well, some songs hit harder than others with me emotionally, and it could be because of the content, but it also could be just because we got very lucky and everything just worked out right on that song. An example would be, I have a song called "Jagged Visions of My True Destiny," and I like all of my songs, and I hope that I put a lot into every song that's made, but sometimes just a song turns out exceptionally special, and that's one of the songs that did that for me. And every time that I perform that song or hear that song, I get like goosebumps listening to it. So I know that I did the right job with that song, with constructing that song. And I wish that I could do that with every song. And there's not really an answer as to why I don't or can't. It's just like some magical component that just sometimes appears, and everything lines up just the right way, and it works out right. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, it's a tricky thing.
Of course, of course. In order to like get that inspiration and that fire to create, do you almost have to like look for it? Do you seek out the inspiration, or do you have like a usual place that you go to cultivate ideas, or does the lyrical inspiration just strike out of the blue for you?
It can be any of those. Sometimes it'll be in my sleep, in my dreams. I'll have an idea, and it can be a visual idea, not necessarily a sonic idea, and not necessarily lyrical, but it could be lyrical as well. And I have notebooks next to my bed that I write in when I wake up in the middle of the night after having these dreams, and I'll use those sometimes as inspiration. Other times it will be something that I read and interpreted or misinterpreted. And usually those are the best. When I misinterpret something, then that gets my imagination stirred up and in a frenzy. And then I come up with what I think are interesting ideas because I've misinterpreted something else, and therefore it's totally new, instead of just narrating something that has already occurred or somebody else's historical past. Um, but there isn't one method to any of this.
Of
I
course.
wish that there was, I guess, or not. I don't know. Maybe I
Be-
don't wish that there was. I'm probably happy with the way that it is because it keeps me guessing as well. If I knew everything and it was always formulaic and the same, I think I would grow very bored of it very fast. And I've been able to not be bored. And like I said earlier, 35 years later, I'm still entertaining myself, and that's really the main thing for me.
Of course. And too, like with the interpretation aspects that you mentioned too, like do you want your music to be open to interpretation, or do you try to maybe engage the listener into the subject matter and what you sing about? Because when I read your lyrics, I could tell that it's not just there for the sake because you need them. I could tell you put your heart, your soul, your blood, your sweat and tears all into those lyrics. I've always said that the ink that you write your lyrics are within your blood. So like do you want the listener to be just as engaged in the lyricism as the music itself, or could they maybe make it their own and interpret it in their own way?
Well, thank you for what you said earlier, and also I would like for people to interpret and misinterpret the lyrics as well. I think that when they do that, they put a bit of themselves into it, and I think that that's sort of like this empty space within the creative world where the audience or the listener can infuse their own imagination into a song, and then they therefore own the song their own way. And if their interpretation is totally the opposite of what I intended, that's even better, because then it has a greater life to it. And if these songs resonate with people, that's amazing. I'm always grateful and surprised when that happens, and it's a wonderful thing. But sometimes people can figure it out too. Sometimes the lyrics are a little more straightforward, and so therefore there isn't too much room for interpretation or misinterpretation. But yeah, I don't really have one answer to it. There's too many songs to have one answer. I'm sorry.
I love it. That's why I love integrity, because there, you can't get even if your lyrics are as direct as 1 + 1 = 2. There is something sort of like metaphorical about it where like you can dive deeper. What I've always admired about hardcore music is that it is very direct and it is in your face, and there is like there's it doesn't need to be interpreted too much, but I think almost like I feel like integrity is almost kind of like the thinking man's hardcore band in a way.
Well, the funny thing about hardcore is when the band started, most of the hardcore scene hated the band because the band didn't follow the rules. It didn't conform to what they were expecting. They wanted more straightforward lyrics. They wanted no guitar solos. They had a whole list of things that you couldn't do. And I'm a nonconformist. I got into underground music because I didn't want to fit in with everybody else. I wanted to do my own thing. And so that was a strange time. And now, many years later, then people say, "Oh, integrity is very hardcore." So it comes in cycles. I think there was many years, decades, where people said it was absolutely not hardcore, and if anything, it was blasphemous towards hardcore. And they put like a witch hunt together, like an inquisition against the band, making zines saying why you shouldn't listen to the band and everything. This is pre-internet stuff.
Um, well, because hardcore, the like I guess like the European use of the word hardcore, it's because I've always said that hardcore is as much of an adjective as it is a noun in a way. Like, okay, sure, like hardcore music, East Coast, West Coast hardcore and whatnot, there is a sound, but like, you look at bands that are being called hardcore today, whether it will be Knocked Loose or Code Orange or Vane or any of those bands, they sound nothing like, the hardcore bands from the 90s or 80s or 70s. So I feel like hardcore in itself, we talked about the evolution of integrity. I think the whole genre had its own evolution to go with it as well.
Yeah, that's true. When I first heard of hardcore, I was into punk and metal and goth and industrial and a bunch of other kinds of musics. And hardcore, the way it was presented at the time, this would be in the early 80s, was too metal to be punk, too punk to be metal, somewhere in between, and extreme. And I think that's where the hardcore part of the word came from, was extreme. Like at the time, the only other thing called hardcore was pornography. So I think that they were trying to say this is an extreme kind of music that blended punk and it blended metal in a weird way, but it didn't have a perfect balance. So you had bands like Black Flag or Suicidal Tendencies and these earlier bands that were doing what was called hardcore. And and then at some point it got very similar. All the bands started to sound similar for a while, and that was about the time that our band started. So while everything started to be a bit more conformist, we came out, and then people were mad that it was that way. So probably, the tides changed again, and people are accepting a variety of sounds and influences,
This is my
which I hope.
Yeah, this is my favorite question to ask every hardcore musician. I had a conversation with Lamb of God about this, and Derek Green from Sepultura about this.
Yeah, he's an old friend
yep,
of mine.
Yep, I'm aware of that as well. I was going to get into that in a second, but like I never, because when I listen to a hardcore band, a classic hardcore band, you name it, Agnostic Front, Sick of It All, whatever. Like, it's just as brutally honest and in your face as a Metallica or a Megadeth or a Slayer or an Anthrax. So I never really understood like the difference between hardcore metal, at least in a sonic level. When I go to a hardcore show versus like a metal show, there's definitely different vibes, different type of people, but like I never understood. They're both very, very heavy. I never understood how a fan of Maiden couldn't appreciate Sick of It All and vice versa, or an Agnostic Front fan couldn't appreciate Anthrax. Maybe you could tell me why.
Oh, gee, I don't know why people would like one kind of music and not the other. For me, I think that all music offers some kind of interesting aspect to it. And I don't eat the same meal every meal. I don't eat the same food. Like I don't have pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I don't watch the same movie. Every time I watch a movie, I'm not watching always the same movie over and over again. So when people like music and they say, oh, I only listen to this one kind of music, I think that that's strange and limiting and bizarre. As far as people who like Iron Maiden, who might like hardcore or punk music, I would say like a band like Gizem from Japan, they sound like Iron Maiden, but with a demented Lemmy singing for them. I mean, the guitar solos are very Iron Maiden, and the vocals are not Iron Maiden like, but I like that aspect of it. I'm not so into the falsetto kind of thing, but yeah, I can't say why people like one thing or don't like something. I think a lot of times it comes to peer pressure or wanting to fit in with your friends or something, or maybe it's just their taste is going one way or the other. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I think that nowadays with the streaming, I'm not really I don't subscribe to streaming platforms, but one thing I can say as a positive towards that is it seems like a lot of people are discovering new music or different music that they never would have normally listened to because of this. It'll be like playing like a new I don't know, let's think of somebody like City Morgue is a hip hop group from your area. So say you start listening to that on one of these streaming platforms, and then it suggests the next play will be the Misfits, and then they're like, whoa, what is this? I never would have heard of this band from the 70s that's, singing about horror. And then it might go to Leonard Skinner, and then it might go to Bauhaus. It might go all over the place. And I hope that people listening to music now are just like, this is good music, but this song sucks, and this song isn't my taste, but this one's great, and that one's great, and you can like everything.
Yeah, for
when
me,
I was a kid, I thought you could like everything, but
I'm
sometimes people tell me it's wrong. I don't care.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure in music. For me, like I'm 29 years old, so like I grew up with metalcore. So like I was growing up listening to Killswitch Engage and All That Remains, On Earth. Like because they were both influenced by metal and hardcore, I guess to me, I never knew that there was a difference between the two. So I think the future has been getting more and more genreless. I saw Ice Cube play before Godsmack and Guns N' Roses, and everybody was equally into it. So I think
Yeah, that's good.
we're slowly uniting together. There was two more questions I actually had with regarding to the lyrics. Actually, going back to the interpretation aspect of it, because you're also remixing your older albums and whatnot, but fans have been interpreting it. So when you either remix an album or a fan interprets it in their own way, do you think that the music has even more context behind it based off of people's interpretation and experience with it?
That's something that I don't know if I can answer. That's up to each person's personal interpretation and the way that they enjoy a song or don't enjoy a song. As far as the mixes are concerned, when we were making those records, we had a very limited budget, and we couldn't afford to do what we wanted to do with the albums. And at the same time, technology didn't exist to allow us to get to that level of what we wanted to achieve with the songs. So now, because of computers and because of advanced technology with plugins and different things, different components within the DAW, within the trying to think of a normal way to say it, recording software. Within that, you can do a lot of different things that you couldn't do back in the when I was recording a lot of those records. They were on reel-to-reel tapes, and they were recorded on mixing boards. So if we wanted something to fade in or fade out or mute, we all had to stand at the board and be choreographed enough to, okay, get ready to hit that, push that, and now pull this, and then we'd all have to do it like perfectly in order. And if we messed it up, we'd have to start all over again. And now with computers, you can just automate everything with your computer. It does it all itself, and a lot of other things can be done that way. In addition to, sometimes certain sounds will cancel out other sounds, so you have to be careful with that. Back then, we didn't have a chance or a choice to go any way other than just deal with it. And now you can fix those things, and now you can bring out some of the bass that might have been lost, or some of the, certain guitar solos might have got muddied or lost in the mix of other sounds that were in the same frequency range. Different things like that we're able to enhance and bring out. And as far as people's interpretation, and if they're going to find it to have the same sincerity, I mean, I hope so. But when we record the albums in like sort of a ramped up mania, and that's why it has the intensity that it does. And I hope that translates to people when they're listening to the music. And in my, when I grew up, my parents are Pentecostal, so they believe in faith, and they believed in this sort of like speaking in tongues and this frenzy of religion. And I, without, unconsciously, I put that component into the music when I started making music. And that's because that's what I knew. I didn't know how to make music. I was just a teenage kid, and I liked certain bands, and I thought, I'll just reverse engineer these songs that I like from other bands and try to write things, and it all came accidentally together that way. So I don't really have the right way to tell anybody how to do this. It's just trial and error, and a lot of it's like I said before about misinterpretation. Probably my misinterpretation when I was doing reverse engineering of songs that I liked, I was probably like, oh, it's probably done like this, and I'm sure it wasn't done like that, but I thought it was. And then that, because of that mistake, that allowed me to have my own technique or style or whatever that I could bring to the table with my creative process. Yeah. So I'm grateful that I made those mistakes.
Yeah. With the advent of technology, I've always said, thanks to technology, fucking shit up isn't just exclusive to the live show. You can now do it. You can now fuck shit up in the studio in more ways than one. But when you have to like confront your own personal for lack of better words, demons, or any tragedy that's incorporated, or just anything that even just angers you in a way. Obviously writing art, writing music and creating art based on that is very cathartic. But do you feel like that it can almost defeat the purpose in a way, or not defeat the purpose? The songwriting process could almost be deteriorating, just as deteriorating as it could be cathartic if you're confronting your own personal darkness.
I think that when you write about subjects that are very personal and and better yet painful towards you, that you have a better song out of that. You're able to exercise those demons and at the same time capture those demons into a recorded audio. Some of my favorite music growing up was blues music, and a lot of that music comes from sorrow, comes from misery. In particular, my absolute favorite was recordings of guys that were in prison in the South in like the early 1930s or whatever, and these guys were absolutely mistreated, absolutely in hell, literal hell. Every day was hell for them. The only thing that they had to escape while they were on a chain gang wearing wool in the hottest part of American South was music. And they would sing, and they would be temporarily out of their misery, out of their hell, out of their flesh prisons and real prisons. And they would elevate themselves to this other dimension of spirituality or just escape. And that's always also been a very big component of what I try to achieve with my music, is to use music as a means of escape, as a means of relief from the pain of this world. And when a song doesn't have that kind of passion and desperation for escape, I think that it often can lose that can lose the magic of the song. But I can also appreciate pop songs that are just singing about silly things, like songs that might be on the radio, and it has a catchy something to it, and I could be like, yeah, that's an interesting song. It's a fun song. Not every song has to be absolute total misery,
Of
and
course.
my songs tend to be that way, but not every song has to be that way.
I'm so glad
And
to hear. Oh, yeah.
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's so good to hear you mention that, because I've always hated when people like accused pop music, and I mean all pop music. I don't care if it's fucking Katy Perry or Cardi B or whatever. Like, people say, "Oh, that's all shallow. They're singing about girls and parties." I'm like, okay, but people like that, and people
Sure.
resonate with that. Like, people wanted to criticize Cardi B's WAP. I'm like, okay, we all know what that means and that stands for.
Yes.
Okay, people like that though. That's what people like. A lot of people
Sure.
like that. So of course it's going to resonate with people, and the millions of people watching her in the stadiums is because they like that. So in the end, is it
course.
really that shallow if they're bringing this to the masses? They're singing about something that is resonating with a lot of people. Sure, it may not be
Right.
metaphorical. It may not be, diving into something super deep, and it may be something basic, but just because it's basic doesn't necessarily mean it's shallow.
Somebody who's going to say that is probably taking themselves far too seriously, and they're probably insecure about who they are, so they have to try to create these villains and characters that are somehow in opposition to what they're doing, their creativity. I think, for example, I enjoy listening to Cardi B. I think that Cardi B is she's a personality. I think that it's a different thing when you're listening to her songs. It's you're listening to almost, I wouldn't say a comedian, but in a way like a comedian. She reminds me of an old entertainer from the 70s named Charo, who used to be on all these talk shows and game shows and things. And she had this really fun energy about her, and wit and energy like crazy, and I think Cardi B has a lot of that too. And she's pushing the limits with what you're allowed to say in pop songs, as
Which
you just mentioned.
It's pretty punk.
And she's doing dangerous things on her way,
Yeah.
whereas other people may do dangerous things in their way, and so on. But like I said before, I don't eat the same food for every meal, and I listen to a lot of different music accordingly because of that. So anybody who wants to just be only listening to one kind of music, I'm suspect of them.
Of course. And I have and I have two more questions for you. That's cool. The next question I want to talk about is the live hardcore show, because to me, when it comes to a hardcore show, the live show, you're not getting anything better than that. Like, I love listening to it, but when I see a hardcore band, the crowd interaction and the aggression, and the stage is part of the audience and vice versa. But do you feel like the hardcore aesthetic of a show is almost something you like have to practice or master over time, or is it one of those things where kind of like you either have it or you don't? And is there also maybe like a similar energy that you channel into the live presence as you do when you're songwriting?
I can only speak from myself and my band. I don't know if this month we're fitting into the definition of hardcore or not. If say that we are, whatever, maybe we might be. For me, I look at it as sort of like I said before, like a church. This is the congregation. This is interaction with the people. The people are there because they're, in my opinion, oftentimes having a difficult time in life. Maybe they have a tough time at school. Maybe they have a tough time at home with their relations with their families, with their parents, with their loved ones, or maybe they're going through some rough patches. I think that oftentimes that's the type of people who gravitate towards the music that I make. And when they come to the shows, the concerts are a means to take away the pain from them, and hopefully give them a new sense of hope and meaning for their life, to get out all that aggression that they've had built up in them all week long. Their bosses, berating them, or all week long they're worried of how they're gonna pay their bills, or whatever the problems that everybody has, including me. And they can come to the shows and they can get all of that out, or at least a lot of that out, and feel better, cleansing themselves. It's an exorcism. That's how I always see it, something like that. I don't know if other bands see it that way or not. I never really compared notes with anybody about something like that. But for me, that's what it was like for me, and that's what I think. That's what I'm giving back to people, whether they see it that way or not. Maybe some people just come and say, "Hey, this is fun," and that's cool too. But I think that I know for a fact that after the shows, I often talk to the people who come to the shows, and I'll have a lot of people who will say that things are going bad for them, and that this was a moment or this was an evening that made them feel better. And not just my show, other shows can do the same for everybody. So I think that that's an important element to it, and looking out for each other, and a lot of this is not an easy life to live. And as we see, as time goes by, we lose a lot of friends who get stuck in dark places, who get beat down by their own minds, by society, by people who are supposed to be looking out for them, and so on. And I think that it's important for us to band together. I mean, a lot of us are outcasts, and that's why we gravitated towards this type of underground music. And I kind of feel a bit of a responsibility for me to make sure that I keep that in my mind when I'm performing and when I'm interacting with people, so that I know that so that they know that I'm I guess I'm in their corner, that I'm supporting them as people supported me when I was younger, and I was facing harder times. I still face hard times now sometimes, and everybody does. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm meandering and running all over the place with this, and it makes no sense.
No,
but it's a difficult thing to put your emotions into words, especially with this, because this is a very spiritual thing for me, performing like that. And it means everything to me to make this kind of music. So when other people can also feel that and say to me, "Hey, the music really means something to me too," that's the most special thing anybody can say to me.
Absolutely. I mean, with all these shows, like misery and anger and any negative emotion you could feel when it's by yourself, it's deteriorating and it's painful. But when you put all of us in a room together, and then there's one focal point of somebody expressing that anger instantly becomes a positive thing. Now, I would rather live in a world where I wasn't angry at all, but like in the end, it's a fucked up world. We're going to be angry one way or another. So to have this release and this unity, I mean, really what I love about a hardcore show in the end is that it really made me feel like I was not alone, and I know that that did for a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and they
That you're not alone.
yeah, and they practice unity and not just preach it. Um,
Yeah, hopefully.
yeah, and the final question I wanted to ask you is the origins of integrity coming from you're from Cleveland, Ohio, right?
I moved to Cleveland when I was 16.
Okay. So with the origins, because you know what, I've always heard West Coast hardcore and East Coast hardcore, and like when I think of like bands that originated from Cleveland, and this could just be from my age, but I'm thinking of Chimera or Ringworm, you know, like a lot of bands like formed later. So I'm just curious. So what was there like a Midwest hardcore scene in a way? I know Derek from Sepultura was very well affiliated with you guys, and he was living there before joining up with them. So.
Yeah, Derek was actually an original member of Integrity for a brief period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But Derek had his own band called Outface, which was a bit more of a post-hardcore band. And actually, on those records, if you can find them, I don't know if they still exist, but he doesn't sing the same way. He was singing, crooning to the ladies, kind of a vibe. Was what he did.
Oh,
It's
now I
very
really
different.
need to find
They're
those.
very different in Sepultura.
I need to find those now.
Yeah, they did an album. The album was called Friendly Green by the band Outface. It's one word, Outface.
I'll check it out.
And it was a bit like Dag Nasty, if you know who they were.
I've heard of them, but I need
Yeah.
to check out their
Well,
work.
it had a more romantic element to it, like about. I think that the idea. I'm saying this a bit ignorant, but I think that the idea of that kind of music was more like hardcore or punk guys who went off to college and then they discovered girls and then they sang songs like that. But I'm not trying to trivialize what he did, but you know, this is kind of what I thought that that scene was, you know. So
That's
maybe I'm
awesome.
wrong, but it kind of had that thing where instead of being like, "Hey, I'm fucking angry," it was more like, "My heart is with you, lady. I'm in love." This kind of stuff, like Tom Jones or something, you know. It's not unusual, but with guitars.
It could be the way like Mike Patton put out music to make love to your old lady by. This could be his version of that, which is
Yeah, it
one
might
of-
have been, yeah.
But like,
But,
was there like a thriving hardcore scene in the Midwest, kind of?
Well, there was Negative Approach was from Detroit, which wasn't too far away from Cleveland, and I think that they're, you know, one of the premier hardcore bands. They're on par with Black Flag, something like that, in my mind. You know, and then DC had a lot of bands, Minor Threat, and that whole Discord scene. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when most people think about it, they think New York or they think L.A. That's those were the big cities, but the most populated cities as well. So of course you're going to have a lot more bands in those areas.
Yeah.
Cleveland didn't have a very thriving scene or a very big scene. I think that the biggest band that we had in the 80s would have been the Dead Boys.
Okay.
But then they moved to New York and you guys took them.
Sorry.
So we lost those guys.
hey, but you guys still have 9 Inch Nails. So.
Yeah.
So.
That's true.
So you outdo.
I don't
it.
know if they were considered hardcore, but yeah, 9 Inch Nails. When I was a kid, I had a studio loft in this building called the Film Building on 21st and Payne in Cleveland, and my loft was on the 6th floor, and on the 4th floor was a recording studio called Right Track Studio, and Trent was the intern there, and that's where he learned how to do mixing, and he wrote and recorded Pretty Hate Machine on that floor.
Really?
And most of the stuff that he would work on would be R&B music from the job, because the studio only worked with R&B. They wouldn't let us record there because they said our music sucks, you know, and they wouldn't work with that kind of music, only with like R&B and a little bit of like R&B influenced hip hop stuff. Would go Heavy D recorded there, and Levert and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's where he got his big break, I guess.
Yeah.
Was recording.
So you were living
Closed
above.
down.
You were living above history in the making as you were making your own,
Sure.
which I think is awesome.
But my friends were. He's older than me, so when I was younger than that, one of my friends, Bill Gill, he was my age, and he had an older sister named Katie Gill, and Katie and her friends were good friends with Trent. And I think I was like 16 or something. We went to go see Pink Floyd The Wall at a college that plays movies, for the students, and the older kids were forced to bring me and my friend Bill because we were the young kids. The parents made them bring us. So I went to go see Pink Floyd The Wall with Trent and Kate and them. But this was before he had the band, that band. He had a different band.
Exotic Birds.
Yeah, I think it was Exotic Birds.
Yep.
It was a different style of music.
Yeah.
But I went to the Pretty Hate Machine release party at his house when that came out with Kate and Bill. I wasn't good friends with him. I didn't really know him, but the scene was so small that everybody was sort of in the same scene.
Yeah.
I think Derek also was at that party too, if I remember right.
I gotta hit him up again. I was like, Derek, we're due for a part 2.
Yeah, Derek and I and Bill, we were always hanging out with each other. Before we had bands, we had like an amateur skateboarding team, which it was really just hanging out with your friends. We faked that we had a team. We would make stickers and stupid things. That's where I kind of learned how to make stickers and t-shirts and things, was starting out in that world. And that's how we became friends, or that's how our friendship really grew close. And one of our other friends decided that he was going to get a guitar because he saw that Steve Caballero had a band called The Faction, and he thought maybe he could play guitar, and he started playing guitar and figured out he could do it. So then we all thought, well, maybe we can make bands too. And that's how it all started. We didn't know that we could make music. It was all an accident.
Yeah, a high tide raises all ships.
Yeah. And the guy's name is Charlie Garriga. He lives near, he has a bar called Puffy's.
Wait, that's him?
Charlie, yeah.
But oh my God, I gotta.
You know Charlie?
I don't know Charlie, but I've heard of Puppies.
Yeah, Charlie's one of the owners at Puffy's, and he's also playing in Gorilla Biscuits and Judge.
Okay.
But he originally lived in our area, and he was kind of the reason why all of us have bands.
I gotta pay him a visit. I didn't know Puppies had so much history.
Yeah. Also, another funny story is that another guy who was on our skateboard team, but also later became a musician, he ended up dating this girl named Jenny Green, and Jenny was dating Trent before, and they broke up. So he wrote an album because he was so heartbroken that she left him for Frank, and that was Pretty Hate Machine.
Wow.
So Frank ended up playing second guitar for my band at some point. And we were good friends with this guy named Rich Patrick, who played guitar in Nine Inch Nails.
Filter.
And his brother was the Liquid Terminator, the actor who played the Liquid Terminator. You know the Terminator movies with Arnold?
Yeah, the T-1000?
Yeah, Rob Patrick is his name. And he turned into the Liquid, kind of like a melting robot guy.
Yeah.
And he's in movies still. I think he was in X-Files for a while, and True Blood maybe. But anyways, where was I at with it? I got a little bit sidetracked. So Frank was playing second guitar for my band, and Rich was in Nine Inch Nails but not making much money, so he was like selling acid to us and to all of our friends. And then at some point, a record exec came backstage to a Nine Inch Nails show and tried to get Rich to like agree to a deal for Nine Inch Nails, but he didn't really have the authority to make such a deal. But he said, hey, but I have a band too. Whether or not he really had a band at that moment, I don't know. But then they offered him a deal, and that became Filter. So then he needed a guy to play bass. So Frank, he was his good friend. So Frank quit my band to play for Filter, and then they made the record that had like Hey Man, Nice Shot, and all those big hits.
Damn, this is like, please write a book, please, please. This is
like just silly stuff from when we were kids. It has nothing to do with my band, really.
I think it has everything to do. Your life experiences make you who you are as an artist, and we may not have gotten, like the classic stuff off of Integrity from like Those Who Fear Tomorrow. So you never know. This could have been the making of Those Who Fear Tomorrow without you even realizing it.
I can tell you another funny story is that when we were kids, and Charlie had just gotten the guitar, and then we all started getting instruments and figuring out different things. I don't know if we did this on purpose or if it was, again, Charlie's uh, genius, or if it just was an accident. But they used to have this thing called open mic night underneath this like dance club, this like techno club where people would go uh, at night, and they would have this. They would have a live setup with all the instruments, and you could go there and pick up an instrument, whether you knew how to play it or not, and try to play it, or if you hopefully knew how to play it, it would go a lot better. But you would get totally roasted by the audience for almost anything. And that's how we all learned how to be on stage, was we would go up there, and also part of it was they would yell out something. For example, like do a reggae song, or do a classic rock song, or whatever it would be. The audience would yell that out while you would be up there with people who sometimes are your friends, sometimes are strangers, and you'd have to improvise and sort of hope to be able to, like, if I was doing the vocals, I'd have to come up with lyrics on the spot and make it work and hopefully match with what these guys are doing. And when the transitions would come with the other guys, who most were strangers, you'd have to feel that out and go with that. So that was like our trial by fire, all of our friends when we were kids.
You practice.
But we saw it also like skateboarding, like the danger of skateboarding, like jumping off of big stairs. You're probably going to hit your face on the concrete most of the time, and some of the times you're not. So that was kind of the goal for what we were doing with that. But we learned a lot of our our performance chops that way, you know. So you were able to, like, to deal with people like, you fucking suck or whatever. And most of the times that was what you would get out of it, especially from your own friends, you know, because that was part of the fun too.
You got better at your instrument, and it gave you a thicker skin, and I think that is genius. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and for such an excellent conversation and for some awesome stories. Just before we go, is there anything else you would like to promote for Integrity in terms of new music or anything else going on?
Oh, there'll be a new record eventually, and I don't really promote stuff too well.
Okay.
To the chagrin of the record company, probably, but yeah, that's not really my thing. I'm not.
You're not the first. I interviewed Villy Vallo 2 weeks ago, and he said, I'm not a salesman, so just check out the record. Have a good one. Yeah. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Integrity. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time.